You're wearing a sweater that was selected for you by the people in this room from a pile of stuff.
Give me a full ballerina skirt and a hint of saloon, and I'm on board.
I have a hole in my stomach!
I can't go back.
Welcome to the She Became Visible podcast. I'm your host, Renee Steelman. This podcast is my story. It's your story. It's our story. It's all the stories of all the women who one day knew that it was time to remember who they were, who they are, and stand up and be seen. Welcome to She Became Visible. I'm Renee Steelman, your host, and I am so excited about this show. The reason I am excited is I love talking to other women my age who have gone through life like many of us have, ups and downs, valleys and hills, climbing, happy, sad, the whole bit. And why I want to talk to Susan and share her story with you is that she has lived an extraordinary life. Now, does that mean that her life has been a piece of cake? No, it hasn't. It's been real. And I'm going to let Susan tell you about it. So let me do a little bit of introduction for you. This is Susan Guidi, and we're going to talk about that fabulous last name. She has been the owner of Advanced Ultrasound for more than 25 years. She is a pioneer in diagnostic ultrasound technology, and I'm really excited to talk to her about that. She trained at Johns Hopkins Hospital and taught her first courses in ultrasound in Chile. She then received her master's degree in Paris. I mean, just lazy. I'm really here to motivate Susan to do more with her life. I mean, come on. Jeez Louise. She is the mother of 3 and grandmother of 7, which I love. And here's the thing that I really love about her. She's a part-time stand-up comic. I mean, come on. But I don't want to talk anymore. I'm going to bring Susan on and let her finish telling her backstory, and then we're going to share her current story and what she's doing with her life. So let's get rid of this. And Susan.
Hello.
Hey.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
I am so excited as well. And one of the things, I've heard you on some other podcasts, and when I first heard you introduced, the first thing that came to my mind was Jersey Boys. Have you seen Jersey Boys?
I have seen Jersey Boys.
Okay, remember the part where Frankie Valli is talking to his soon-to-be wife, and he's telling her that he's gonna change his name, and she's like, no. You have to have a vowel at the end of the name. I mean, pizza, Guidi. You have to have a, Pelicano. There has to be a vowel at the end of your name. It's like, oh, okay, I didn't know that, So tell me about your last name. Where do you come from, and where does that beautiful name come from?
So that is my married name. I never changed it. I actually come from Tampa, Florida. I grew up in Florida, which is unusual in Tampa. I am half Cuban and half American. My mother was from Santiago, Cuba. She came before Castro. My father was as gringo as they could come. Blonde hair, blue eyes, from upstate New York.
Oh my God.
He was the yin to her yang. And I married a physician from Chile when I was pioneering ultrasound in Chile. I often joke that I had to go 3,000 miles to, have my first date in those days, because I went from high school to nuclear medicine school and then to Johns Hopkins. And I was a good Catholic girl, mea culpa, mea culpa. And I'm of the age that women in my community that were very Catholic and Cuban didn't have sex before they got married. You married the man that you were going to obviously sleep with. So I'm not so sure I would do that again if I had a choice. But that was my journey. And he was a physician in the classes that I was teaching in Chile. I went for the first time in 1980. And that is his last name, Guidi.
Guidi, I love it. So what was your blonde father's last name? What was your maiden name?
Mobley. Yeah, I know. What I mean,
you
it's
had to
just
go from a Cuban mother and then a very non-Cuban husband with a non-Cuban maiden name, and then back
and then back.
to my fabulous Latin name.
Which is more French because his family were first generation French. They had come after World War II. So in fact, my ex-husband, his name was Claude, and he has a very thick French accent. In fact, so bad, funny story. This is where I think a lot of the humor comes from.
Yeah.
When I got married, my father was a big prankster. And in the reception line, he told everyone that my former husband's name was Clyde. It wasn't Clyde, it was Claude. But no one could ever pronounce it. And the way Claude said it, he would always say Claude. So people would come up and say, "Oh, nice to meet you, Clyde." And he'd go, "No, it's Claude." And they go, "What?" And he'd go, "It's Claude." And then he'd say it more French. And they'd go, "What?" And I'd go, "It's Claude." And then they'd like keep on. So lots of jokes from the get-go.
I love it. I love it. I always say, the only time Starbucks ever got my name right was when we were in Paris. They'd say, "What's your name?" And I'd say Renee, and they would spell it correctly on the cup, And so, oh my gosh, that's hilarious. And I would love. Are you still doing your one-woman show?
I just did it in November of last year. Actually, it was the beginning of December. So December 2023. I did it because a dear friend of mine, Christina Nuzzo, who I just adore, who I met through Instagram, had said to me on a trip to New Jersey that I had taken, she goes, "We have this small club." And I was just throwing it out there. I said, "Oh, I have this show that I want to do." And she goes, "It's the perfect location." And in 6 months, we did it. And then you probably have followed some of my bodybuilding journey.
Yeah.
I have to have a hip replacement in October.
Oh.
I know. So it sort of put the next show on hold.
Yeah.
Just because I really had to navigate sort of, the mind, FUCK, of all of a sudden being at the top of your game, right?
Yeah.
Physically, athletically, to sort of having to contemplate something that we often associate with an older person's problem, right? So the last couple of months have been just trying to find a surgeon. What am I going to do? So it's not done, but ideally the next show I'll do will be home here in Tampa.
Do you hear what she just said? She just said, "I'm going to have a hip replacement, and then I'm going to do this show, and then I'm probably going to get." Do you hear that? That's what I'm talking about. It's that. Oh yeah, well, there's just another little stop sign in my life. But
totally.
Stop me completely. It's just a pause, and it's going to have, and I'm going to have to rethink, and I'm going to have to re-navigate how to do this. And that's what I love. And I love, you and I have, like I said, we're the same demographic. You grew up Catholic. I grew up Mormon. And I always say, whenever I would take all my kids, I would get two responses. One of them would be, "Are those all yours?" And I'm like, "Do you think I gathered the children in the neighborhood to take shopping?" It's like, "Yes, they're all mine." And then they'd say, "Oh, are you Mormon or Catholic?" And and so I'd say Mormon. And, but you grew up with that same religious training. You didn't have sex before marriage, and, the whole bit. You had sex when you got married, which was interesting. And then, like you say, I don't know how long you dated your husband, but, my husband and I dated for, let's see, July, August, September. And then he went away for 2 years. I went away for 2 years. We wrote back and forth, and we got married 3 weeks after he came back. And that's just what you did. That's just what you did.
Oh, it did. I met him in Chile. So I was teaching one of the first courses ever in South America in ultrasound. And I met him. And then as soon as I taught the course, they were so impressed. They wanted me to come back and stay to train people to do what I was doing. And we, in the meantime, sort of had this romance via cassette tapes because I
Yes.
don't know if you remember, girl, to make a long distance phone call from someplace like Santiago, Chile,
Oh,
or
yeah.
from France, it was half your rent.
Oh, yeah.
So we would record,
Yes.
cassettes,
Yes.
and that's how we kind of kept in touch. The other thing that my former husband had always had a dream, he was already an established radiologist. So he had always had a dream of coming to practice outside of his country because Chile in those days would give them money to learn abroad and then bring the technology back to their country.
Yes.
And so it was pretty lucrative of a deal if you could get a fellowship. And coming to the States in those days, there were no computers. So to be able to take the tests of English as a foreign language and the medical exam, you had to wait a year, and his time had passed. So that's what he had thought, that he would come to the States, but that didn't happen. And then he got accepted to a place in Paris. And the second year I went back, and I was supposed to stay 1 month, then 2 months, then 3 months. And somewhere around the 4th month, he was sort of hinting that he wanted to marry me. And I remember asking my Cuban mother, what should I do? Because I wasn't sure. I had given up everything. I had this beautiful position at Johns Hopkins. And, my mother was like, this is how she talks. This is why I do comedy.
Yeah.
You're crazy. If you leave him now, he's going to find someone else in France.
Yeah.
So basically take one for the team. He's a doctor,
Yeah.
blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And I did. And 6 months after sort of dating, if you would, we got married in Chile and moved to France. And 2 months later, I was pregnant.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
And now, when you got pregnant and you had your son, did you give up everything? Did you quit all of your ultrasound?
So I have 3 children. I have 2 girls.
Uh-huh.
The first one was the daughter, Danielle, who was born in Paris.
Okay.
And yes, I gave up everything. So when I went to Chile, I was kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, I had left Hopkins. I was this pioneer of ultrasound. I go to France, and the French in those days wanted nothing to do with a sonographer or somebody foreign coming in and scanning. They wouldn't let me scan. I would come into labs and I would try to sneak in, and they would just quash that. So a wonderful story was I called my bosses at Hopkins and said, I'm dying here. Because in those days, my former husband would be gone for 12 to 14 hours during the day in medicine. We had no phones, no computers. So I called my bosses at Hopkins and said, what can I do here? And they said, we're going to introduce you to a professor who's at the University of Pierre and Marie Curie. Go meet him and see if there's something that the two of you can collaborate on. He loved me. Monsieur Panigel. He was a polyglot. He spoke 17 languages. He was like a weeble wobble. He was big and just like you would picture this man. He wore the same black outfit all week long with a little bit of dandruff, but he was brilliant. He didn't speak English. Well, yes, he did speak English. What am I saying? Because he spoke a million languages.
Yeah.
He loved me.
Yeah.
And he said, Madame Guidi, you're going to enroll in the university and you're going to get your master's degree. And we did this one-of-a-kind research study on the placenta. He was an expert on studying baboon placentas with pygmies in Africa. So in Paris, I thought, that's really cool. But in Paris, they wouldn't give me any placentas to scan. So I had to fly back to the States, do all the research while I was pregnant, and then fly back and finish my thesis 5 days before I gave birth. I was literally like this in front of the, judges.
Yeah.
And I had to do it all in French.
Oh my gosh. No. So you have to learn another language.
I had to take part-time classes at the Alliance Française. And then I had to write the thesis in French. And remember, there was no computers.
No.
So the way we wrote the thesis was he would sit next to me and he said, I'm not going to write it for you. I'm going to dictate your work. So I wrote it in English. He
Right.
dictated in French. And then I had to go home and, translate it back into French. It was amazing.
That should not be a master's. That should be a doctorate. I mean, that's insane. I think everybody that went to school, went to college before, the computers and to be able to paste and copy and everything had to be done with carbon paper and everything else should get automatic doctorates for you doing 50 times. Now they have AI, So.
I know. And yeah, exactly. Imagine. But so it was a real labor of love. This man adored me.
Oh.
The only bad little mark because I got it with honors, the only bad, which I think they felt sorry for me because I was pregnant, but the only bad thing that I got, they were like, you didn't use enough European references. But European references in those days were all in the native language. So I couldn't read German or anything else. But I love that story because it also was part of the beginning of people telling me you can't do this.
Yeah.
And my former husband, as we were crossing the university campus, I said, I'm going to get my master's. He said, you're not going to be able to do this. And I remember thinking in my head, and everything I had done was watch me.
Yeah.
That was good that you told me that because not only will I get it, I'll do it with flying colors. And it was wonderful.
So you have this baby 5 days after you get this honor. And then did you think to yourself, okay, I'm just going to play mom now? Or did you?
No, I had a hard time with that
Okay.
because I think I started so young academically
Yeah.
that I always wanted to be a physician. And it was because of financial issues. My parents, when I went to college, I was enrolled in pre-med and it was the summer of 1975. Well, if you were in the States in those days, we had a huge economic crisis, the gas lines and everything. And my parents both lost their jobs.
Oh.
So they couldn't pay for me to go to the big university. So the next choice was a local community college, which had a very unique program called nuclear medicine. And I paid for my own college because I could afford. I took 2 jobs and I could pay for community college. Ultrasound really didn't exist in those days. There was no ultrasound school. There was nothing. I sort of fell into that by chance. The department that I ended up working with, they had a big heiress that donated money to the department. And they donated this ultrasound machine. And my chief was like, do you want to play with that machine? It fell under and I was like, yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And I started scanning and I loved it. And ultrasound, for a lot of people, they don't realize that when I started, ultrasound had to be painted. You had to create an image. It wasn't real time where you saw a heart beating.
Right.
You literally had to draw this complex picture. And so I would take it to the doctor, the images, and they would say, that's worthless. Go back downstairs.
Wow.
That's worthless. So again, another story of you can't do that.
Yeah. Tell the story because when I was listening to your story, it hit me so hard, and I'll tell you why. When you said you had this ultrasound, you had this talent, you had this new medical miracle, and the doctors were going, "Oh, that's cute, honey. We've got CAT scans. We've already got what we need." Can you imagine, saying to Steve Jobs, "It's okay, little boy. That's cute. We have the phone now. Just stop." But no. So they're saying that to you.
6 months of doing it.
Yeah.
6 months. I'd take the images to them. They'd send me back downstairs. All the while, I was keeping, remember notebooks that you could put, it was like a plastic sleeve and you could put slides and stuff.
Yes.
I would keep all my cases because I had to teach myself.
Yeah.
And there was no real HIPAA or anything in those days. So for OB, I knew it would be good for pregnant women because they had fluid, so it was a great medium for that. So I would call obstetricians and say, hey, I have this machine where I think I could see your patient's babies. And women would walk in, I would scan them, send them home, take them downstairs. They would say it's worthless. 6 months into doing this, there was an elderly gentleman that came in, and he had an aortic aneurysm, which is the major artery in your abdomen, which is like a sort of weak area in a tire that's about to blow. But if that blows, you die. And I found it with ultrasound, because the aorta was one of the easiest things I had learned how to scan. So I saved him. Then you know what the doctors told me? Oh, now we're going to hire a real sonographer.
No.
But to sort of pacify me, they said, we'll send you to this course at Johns Hopkins. And I was supposed to go with one of the other radiologists. He couldn't go. He backs out. I go to Hopkins, and they offered me a job at the end of the week. I did everything, Renee. I emptied waste baskets. I followed people around. I thought I had found Mecca.
Yeah.
And at the end of the week, the doctor said to me, would you like a job here? And I remember looking behind me going, are they talking to me? I moved. I had no furniture, nothing. Moved to Baltimore. And Baltimore in those days, for this little girl from Tampa, was sketchy.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was scary in those days.
Yeah.
And I moved and didn't have furniture for like 2 months, but I did it.
Yeah. Yeah. What I find interesting is it's so frustrating. Like my sixth baby, actually, I was pregnant, had a miscarriage. And then because I was a good Mormon, I have never used birth control. And my doctor was like, maybe you should take a little break. And I was like, me? Oh, heck no. I have no problem with babies. I have 5 healthy babies, pop them out like nothing. And so, he gave me a prescription for birth control, and I was like, that's not going to happen, and got pregnant right away. And then during my pregnancy, I would have women say, did your doctor tell you that you probably should have waited a few months after having a D&C and a miscarriage before you got pregnant again? I'm like, no, because he gave me birth control and probably thought I was going to use it, but no. So I got pregnant. So I go in for my prenatal, and my doctor says, you're really unusually large for as far along as you are. Would you like to have an ultrasound? He's asking me. And of course, I'm this good little girl, and I'm like, I don't know, whatever, because I'm thinking, you're the doctor, you tell me. And so he's like, we'll just keep an eye on you. So this is in 1985. And so then I go into labor, my water breaks, I start hemorrhaging, I'm bleeding all over the place. I go to the hospital. They do a test, placenta previa.
Previa.
Yeah, he's born with a diaphragmatic hernia.
Oh.
And they bring in an OBGYN, and they said, did you have a lot of amniotic fluid? And I said, yeah, I was really huge at 3 months. I looked like I was 6. He goes, yeah, that's always a sign that there's a problem. And so if I would have had that ultrasound, they would have seen the diaphragmatic hernia. They would have seen all of these things, and they could have taken steps, because in 1985, there were a couple of doctors that had just done a prenatal surgery where they actually took the baby out, closed the little hole in the diaphragm, put the baby back in, and they had just done that in 1985. But the whole idea that in 1985 ultrasounds were still like, I don't know. Now my girls are going in. The minute they get pregnant, they're doing ultrasounds and all sonograms, all kinds of things. Now they got the 3D thing where you can basically see the baby,
Yeah, I was the pioneer of 3D. I had that. That's the practice that I started. I started the first 3D ultrasound practice almost in the United States, because through this career of mine, I got used to teaching every big advance. So when vaginal ultrasound came about, I taught that for 15 years before we actively used it, because they would say, oh no, it's too invasive. Doctors are always scared of the vagina. So
yes, yeah.
And then to this day, you still have sonographers that'll hand the probe to the patient and say, you put it in. It's just mind blowing.
Well, and talk about that, because you were talking about all of the things that you can do with the sonogram, the ultrasound. They don't have to be as invasive as they are.
No.
And you look at where they're talking about, putting in IUDs or without anesthesia of any kind. And, the things that women put up with, the pap smears that they put up with, and we're in pain and it's uncomfortable, and men just go, whatever, and you can do that, but doctors are still going, why would we do that?
Oh, and sadly, in some respect, I think I always knew this was coming. So I often say, without knowing it, I started my own concierge practice without knowing it was going to be concierge. And I'm not saying I'm catering to only people of an economic status.
Yeah.
What I knew 28 years ago, and it was just when I was getting a divorce, 3D ultrasound. I was doing 3D ultrasound research at our local university. And the 3D prototype machines had really good 3D imaging, but really poor conventional standard 2D imaging. And you needed a machine that did both. And I knew it was going to change everything as we knew it. I will tell people that my mentor, who was a really famous, she was one of the most famous reproductive endocrinologists in the world, her and I, and a doctor from South America, from Colombia, who had not gotten his medical titles here yet. So he was working as an IT person for her. So I often say he could do the Wizard of Oz, like reconstruction. I could scan and she had the machine. And on the first day that, like the Wizard of Oz, this reconstructed 3D of a face comes for a baby, I literally just burst into tears, because I said, I've waited my whole career to see the baby the way we see them in life. And when we would scan together, he had a Spanish accent, and he would warn the patient, he goes, prepare yourself, she's going to cry, because every time the picture would magically come up on the screen, I cry. And I started doing some of the first work in cleft lip. And because that's what 3D was intended for, was facial dysmorphology. And what we learned was that pediatricians in a lot of practices had no idea how to handle a baby if they were born with a cleft lip. So parents were often finding out the minute they handed the baby, right?
Yeah.
And then at that point, they had to worry about, they have all kinds of issues like sucking issues and ear issues and dental issues. And so they need a whole team.
Yeah.
So any babies in those days that had cleft lip, I would do them for free so that I could learn. And then I'd go to their house and photograph the abnormality, and so that I could learn. Because the same thing with Down syndrome was that we were hoping that we could, now we have much better, we have blood tests that detected early, but it was a journey. And I knew, excuse my French, we were doing shit medicine in OB labs. And it's still to this day, we weren't allowed to talk to the patient.
Yeah.
Nurses aren't told you can't talk to a patient, but sonographers were. You were often limited the amount of time you could spend, how many pictures you could give. And I said, I don't care if I scan one patient a day. I'm going to do something that makes me happy.
Yeah.
And I'm still practicing.
Okay. So, and this is the thing that, I mean, of all of these accomplishments and everything that you've done, give me a timeline for babies. Like, you've got your daughter, Danielle.
So now it's 1982. I have my first child.
Okay.
We go from France. We only stay in France for a year. We go from France now back to Hopkins, but now only my ex-husband can work there. We can't both work at my alma mater, because if we were married, I know. So when you said, did you give up everything? Oh yeah, I gave up everything. Then we moved back.
Why can't
Because there was a rule. I don't know.
See, that's the thing. You just want to strangle these little nowadays and go, you don't understand what it was like. Then this was only 50 years ago,
Then we moved to Chile. Now, in Chile, we have a baby. We're starting all over again.
You have your other daughter. You have your next daughter.
I know, not yet until then. I conceived her in Chile. I had her here. Okay. But now we're living under a dictatorship.
Oh, yes.
So it was Pinochet. So the peso devalued overnight. So overnight, everything we owned was cut in half. I think I was making $125 a month. I would work part-time. The cool thing about being in Chile in those days as an American was that you could have help.
Yeah.
So I had to live in.
Yeah.
I hated to call her a maid.
Yeah.
She was just like my
Yeah.
sister.
My daughter lived in Beijing for a while, and she had an IE.
Oh,
And she, this woman had children that lived out in the country, many miles.
yeah.
But she came in every single day, cooked, cleaned, helped take care of it. And she couldn't understand why my daughter was walking around behind her helping her. She's like,
I did too.
Yeah.
I did everything with her.
Yes.
But I learned to cook.
Yeah.
I remember I had a Betty Crocker.
The best.
Remember Betty Crocker?
And white.
I think I made every damn thing in that book because she would do the dishes.
Oh.
But I would share the task with her. Anyway, long story short, I have another child. The economy sucks. The political situation is terrible.
Yeah.
And 4 years into the marriage, we moved back to Tampa, where my former husband was given the opportunity to redo his residency. So he had to kind of start all over again. And guess who has to start all over again too?
Yes. Yes.
So I took a job with 2 babies under 5 at my alma mater, the local community college, taking over the entire ultrasound program. I was working 80 hours a week. We had 1 car,
Oh my gosh.
2 kids in daycare.
Yeah.
It was brutal.
Yeah.
And within about a year,
If you say 2 kids in daycare, that means you are getting diaper bags, baths, clothing, food, packing.
I would cry at the end of the day because they'd be the last babies to be picked up, because I'd have to pick up my babies, so it was tough. And within a year and a half, my former husband, this who I thought I had married Prince Charming because he could cook better than me, clean, has an affair, and it's not with a woman, it's with a man.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And it's in the peak of AIDS.
Oh,
So you can't tell anybody.
yeah.
Yeah, it's 1985.
Your kids would have been banished even. Yeah, that was a horrible time. Yeah.
He's a doctor. I can't.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and I often say the nuns didn't give me that chapter
No.
in the adulting manual that said, what if your husband has an affair
Yeah.
and it's with a man? I didn't know anybody. I hardly knew anyone who was gay. That's how,
No.
I guess,
Yeah.
sheltered.
In the 80s, that's the thing that's so interesting in today's world, is that people say, oh, if we could only go back to the 50s. Like, you think that there were no gay people or there were no depressed women who were drinking from the minute they woke up because they were so depressed. You think all those things because everyone put on a happy face. Everybody just followed these.
I was the good girl.
God. Yeah. And he was following, I'll get married. I can do this. I don't want anybody to find out that, I'm.
You know what I used to think, Renee? On some days when it was so tough, I used to say, okay, this is, sort of the cross I have to bear.
Yeah.
And I have these 2 babies that didn't ask for any of this.
Yeah.
I literally would think this is what it's like to be a nun.
I can live this celibate life. Yeah.
And keep his secret. And the beginning of knowing that I sort of had to keep my mouth shut was that my mother's super tough and we had a really tumultuous relationship.
Yeah.
And one day I was like at my wit's end and I made the mistake. I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to do a share. I'm going to tell her that I think we're having problems. I didn't tell her what.
Right.
I just said, Mama, I think, things aren't. This is literally what she said to me. You know what your problem is? And that's how she talks.
Yeah.
Do you know what your problem is?
Yeah.
It's because you don't cook or clean enough.
Yeah.
I went, I'm thinking in my head, that'll make a man gay.
Yeah.
You don't do the laundry? Poof.
That's
he's
it.
gay.
Yeah.
Right?
Hot
So
dog and cheese.
I knew I had to stay, and I stayed married for 20 years.
No way. And,
Yeah.
did you guys have like an understanding? Like, okay,
Nope.
had an affair. We're just not going to talk about this. Was it just
He
don't ask, don't tell?
was a brilliant, like Einstein IQ.
Yeah.
but he was also a pathologic liar.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So I think part of me, when he said he wasn't doing X, Y, and Z, just said, okay, for survival's sake,
Yes.
this is the story I'm going to believe.
Yeah.
And then, so there's a 9-year difference. So I have 2 girls and then my son, 9 years between them. I often say it was like an immaculate conception, but I often say that it was like the universe or God or whoever it is that you believe in said, you're going to have a tough road ahead of you. This baby boy is a gift. And somehow, Renee, I knew, and it almost like still makes me cry. I knew, I didn't know why,
Yeah.
but I just knew he was going to save me.
Yeah.
And save me is a strong word.
Yeah.
I just knew there was a reason, and he was a gift. And you know, from the minute that baby boy was born, it really was like he was just love in the form of this child that I could use to fill in those voids. Now, by then my ex-husband had been arrested. And in those days when you get as a doctor in town, look, it was just a slap on the hand. They could get away with murder because we had no computers still. So if you got arrested, they could hide everything. I didn't even know he had gotten arrested until 2 months later.
Oh my
And
God.
we got a bill from the psychiatrist. And then even then, he barely told me what it was that he had done. But, you know, in order to have gay liaisons, you would go to these, you know, there was no porn, right? You would go, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's, he got caught. And that began the beginning of, I can't do this anymore. And
So tell me this, because I think this is interesting. You would think under those circumstances that your divorce would be a piece of cake, that he would be like, I understand. What do you need? No. So talk about that. That even though
I love that you asked me that. It was really tough. And I often say I kept quiet for so long. You know, people don't talk about the other side of the closet, right?
Yeah.
He was in the closet, but you don't talk about the other person that was in the second closet, locked without a voice, without validation. So I prepared for 3 years psychologically because I knew as a doctor's wife that my whole life was going to change.
Yeah.
And I knew financially everything that I needed to prepare. Just like a bodybuilding competition, I was in prep psychologically.
Right.
Some of the first attorneys I would see would say, oh, darling, why would you get divorced, darling? You have a beautiful house.
Yeah.
You have everything. Why don't you have an affair, darling?
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember I was at a Macaroni Grill when I met with a female attorney. And you know how Macaroni Grill you could write with a crayon on the paper?
Yeah.
She didn't know it. And as she said, oh, darling, have an affair, darling. I know lots of people that stay in, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm literally writing with a crayon, fuck you, you know, like, because
Yeah. But that's
I was like, this can't be real.
yeah, that was the mentality. Just keep up the facade.
You have everything. You have money.
You have money. What else could you let him have his affairs? You know, you do.
Suck it up, Buttercup. Buy a Louis Vuitton purse and you'll be okay.
Exactly.
You know, get yourself and I had never had an affair. I dreamed, I fantasized a lot, but I didn't.
Yeah.
And so when I finally made that, I took a lot of money. I had saved everything because we were quite wealthy. So I had saved a big chunk. And one attorney said, the day you do this, take a certain amount, take 2 years of your income and put it in a separate bank account, because the minute you start this, he's going to go bananas and you won't get any money. And my kids were in private Catholic school, blah, 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 right? It was the best thing I ever did, but it started World War III. And he became just unrecognizable. He stalked me. He lost his mind. It was almost as if he wasn't losing me, he was losing a possession.
Yeah.
It was like I was his. We had this perfect life. He could have his cake and eat it too. And when I said no mas,
Yeah.
he lost his mind. So then I thought, oh, now the world, they're going to see
Yes.
what I've been through.
Strong woman. Yeah.
I would hear things like, "I poor him. Can you imagine being gay and having to have been stuck all this time?" So I said he got the gay card and he got the doctor card. And that was the beginning of starting my own business doing stand-up, because stand-up for me was the only place where I felt safe to say, does anybody else think this is effed up?
Yeah.
Because this is some effed up stuff. And then he sued me, Renee, every 2 years.
Sued you because he didn't want to pay child support and alimony.
He didn't want to pay child support. He didn't want to pay alimony. He didn't want to do any of it. And I think really, honestly, in some perverse way, I think he just always, in a sick way, loved me. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, he
I
loved
was a good person. He loved me, right?
Yeah.
But he couldn't ever say that.
Right.
He could never fess up what he had done was awful.
Yeah.
So this in some way was a way of kind of just like a bee coming back into, you know. And then finally, at one point I said, I don't want anything else. I don't want your money.
Yeah.
My son had graduated from high school, and that was, it was beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, and I often thank him because I would never be this person, ever.
Exactly. And tell everybody, because I'm so impressed. Tell everybody what your kids are doing now.
So my son, the baby boy that I raised on my own, I give so much gratitude to, because he's a physician and he lived with me during the pandemic. He was in medical school when the pandemic was going on. So that child doesn't have any children. He's in his 4th year of residency, and he's such a gift to he still is.
Well, everybody, just as a sidebar, because I almost fell off the chair when I heard this. Tell everybody, as a resident, the number of hours that he's putting in and what he's paid.
Oh, isn't it? It wasn't ridiculous.
I
mean, our medical system is so broken. He must work, probably because he's on nights now, probably easily 70, 80 hours a week.
Right.
They're paid $13 an hour.
That, people think, oh, this person is married, her husband's going through medical school, he's a resident, or, and they think, oh, what a great life. And they don't understand. Yeah, she's got 3 kids. He's getting $13. Like you were saying, he could work at McDonald's
and make more money.
And people don't, not only are they mentally exhausted, physically exhausted, the sacrifice is unbelievable.
And he's a good doctor. So that is the baby. Then moving to my middle child, she has 5 children.
Yes.
She's amazing. She's extraordinary. She is the best mom. She is a nurse practitioner midwife.
Oh.
So she and I always shared a love of women's health.
Oh.
I started teaching sexuality to young women at their high school when she was in high school.
Yeah.
And she would teach it to her girlfriends. And now she's sort of the product of that. And she's so good. She's just so good with women and women's health, and an advocate. And then my oldest, the one that was born in France, is in the cosmetic sort of industry. She works for a plastic surgeon. She worked for Nordstrom's for a long time in their cosmetics department. She's brilliant, gorgeous. She has 2 babies. So I'm really, really, they are my opus magnum.
Yeah.
It was, I think, and I don't regret this, because I knew, it's funny, I always knew intuitively about certain things.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, the one thing you don't want to sort of short time with was your kids, because you can't make that up. And you can't get a promise that they're going to turn out to be amazing children, but I sacrificed without a regret to be there, to be present, to love them, to make sure that I saw them.
Yeah. But everybody that I know, and here's the thing, and I don't know if you got any of this from Catholicism, but in Mormonism, when I was growing up, the leaders of the church literally over the pulpit said, if you put your children in daycare, you are a bad mother. If you work at all outside of the home, you are a horrible mother. And so all of these women, they're having 5 and 6 and 7 kids. They're depressed. They're frustrated because they're talented like you are. But they had no outlet to express their talents or their brilliance or anything like that. So they're depressed. Utah has the highest amount of depression in the nation. And the amount of it's amazing. The amount of plastic surgery is high. You would think that LA would have the highest amount of plastic surgery.
Wow.
Utah, because there's this perfection idea where you not only have to have 8 babies, but you should look like you've never had one, and you should look like you're 20 for the rest of your life. There's this perfectionist, there's this weird mentality that goes into fundamental religions. And so, but every person that I know that had some kind of a profession and their children were in daycare, those kids have the highest respect for their mother. They have the idea that, oh yeah, I can be me. I can also be a mom. I can also have a family. They learned that. I've never known anyone that said, my mother worked full time, but I knew she was there for me. We had the greatest, experiences, but she taught me that I could be me and I could express who I am. That's what I hear. And it's amazing. But I from the other side, I hear, I don't know, my mom was depressed. She was never there. She never came out of the bedroom. That's what I hear from women who were told you can't do anything outside the home, or you're bringing your
And
home.
then your kids, just like at this age, if they're not seen,
Yeah. Yeah.
what happens to them?
Exactly.
If someone doesn't see, they can tell a great joke. They have this skill at gymnastics, whatever it is.
Yeah.
My dad had given me that gift. So I grew up with a dad who was a funeral director, but he should have been a full-time musician. I know. That story alone is, I grew up in a funeral home.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
we were in a family harmonica band.
My God.
And we did. I was the lead harmonica player. I know. And I still play the harmonica. I played it in my one-woman show because nobody believes me that I can play the harmonica. But he gave me this ability, no matter what I would want to do, he would say, well, if not you, who?
And why not you? So I want you to just take a little minute, because then I want to get into your health journey. Talk about, you're going to Northwestern.
I came back.
And
I just came back.
For physicians. I mean, I've never heard of that. But when you said that, I thought exactly what you said is that I remember going through TSA and saying to the person that was, scanning my body and stuff, I said, you could have at least bought me dinner before. And they kind of looked at me like, what are you talking about? And because I have one doctor that had a sense of humor. The rest of them are just so freaking left brain that it just is like, that logically doesn't make sense. Why would I do that? And they're like, whatever, doc, never mind, So tell everybody
so my stand-up journey, I started doing stand-up as an answer to this craziness of my marriage. Right. And then I realized I went to New York, got a solid 5-minute set, and then it was hard to practice stand-up. If you were a single mom, you'd have to find yourself in the club at 11 o'clock at night. Yeah. And I would tell people stand-up wasn't conducive to an over 50 woman, because you were up against 19-year-olds and their routines were usually, I stooped her here, I stooped her there, I stooped her everywhere, like a Dr. Seuss book. And I would say, there aren't enough holes. We don't have that many holes, right? And it was always the same stupid routine. So I got it sort of intellectually frustrated with stand-up, because I was never going to be a famous stand-up. I was using it as a tool. Then I found improv. And for people who don't know what improv is, I would say the most well-known type of improv is that show called Whose Line Is It Anyway? And that's called short form improv. Basically, it's making up things on the spot. And I've been doing it for almost 15 years. And I tell everyone, I think everyone should do improv. So when my son was in medical school, before he went to medical school, he was on my improv team. And he's brilliant. He did stand up with me. He did improv with me. And he can do accents. He's just brilliant. And when he went to medical school, I said, Jean-Claude, there was like a week where you could do creative things. I said, let's run an improv class and teach the medical students how to do improv. And basically the tenets of improv are saying yes and. They're really common sense. Yes and. Imagine if you yes anded your life.
Yes.
Instead of saying no, you said yes and there's no failure in improv. And you're present when you do improv. You have to, because to make up stuff, you can't be thinking about cooking a lasagna, right?
You have to be listening and yeah.
And I was blown away how well this class went over. Then I started doing motivational speaking a couple of years ago after my weight loss transformation. And last year, I thought, okay, I want to tell people about me, but I want to empower women. And women of our age not only become invisible, they also are invisible and their voices are silent. And I often say it's like their candles got blown out.
Right.
And I said, if you could hear your story, now I know about you. I'm connected to you on such a level that is so vastly different than if I don't know your story. And I said, we should know everyone's story,
Right.
but especially women over 50, their stories. They've survived so much.
Right.
It's so beautiful. So I taught improv in this it was 2 hours, and I got such great feedback. And then at the end, because of these improv exercises, I had 3 volunteers tell 3-minute stories, almost like a short moth or TED-like kind of.
Right.
Ad lib, because of the exercises. There wasn't a dry eye. And all these women were over 50, and each of their stories was mind-blowing. So I had been following, you know, Alan Alda, MASH?
Yeah.
He was the creator of this concept of medical improv. And the idea is to use these games and stories from improv to get doctors to be better communicators, to be better present, to say yes and, to get rid of status, right?
Right.
And I followed this amazing woman from Northwestern, Katie Watson. She's an attorney, mind-blowing. And I saw the class and I just signed up. And there were 50 of us, predominantly all physicians from all over the country.
Oh,
5 days, life-changing.
interesting.
Life-changing. So we're one of like 200 something that have the only people that have been trained. But I want to use medical improv. If I have a chance to teach doctors, fine. I really want to use it for women over 50.
Yes, yes. It's so indoctrinated for women to just be quiet and to keep their problems to themselves and just support their husbands, just be there for their grandkids and don't make a rustle at all. And it's in our demographic is specifically. And so even on my show, you know, the last few months, when I started back again in January, I decided, okay, I living in when you've left a fundamental religion, you've got, neural pathways that have been dug deep in this religion, and it's hard to just let it go and just go, oh, okay, well, I just won't do that anymore. So I kind of got sucked back into talking about life as an ex-Mormon. And then I kind of woke up and I just said, what am I doing? What am I doing? I got to move on, because I'm like you. It's like, I see these women at 70 years old that are still following their husbands, doing what their husbands want to do, literally sitting in a golf cart. We live in a golf community, sitting in a golf cart with their knitting or their book because their husband wants to play golf and he would just love her to be with him. And she doesn't really want to go, but sure, honey, I'll go sit in the golf cart next to you. Or I'll even start playing golf. I don't like golf, but I'll start playing golf so that we can be together, And I just see this and I'm like, holy crap, at what point do you say, You go and have a great time playing golf. I don't want to play golf. I don't want to sit with you in your golf cart. And I'm not going. In fact, I'm leaving on Friday and I'm going to Sedona for the weekend by myself. And their husbands are like, what? What? You know, but they've just been, it's just something that we need to make a difference. And you've only got so many years left, girlfriend. If you don't do it now, it's not going to change. And maybe, for some that makes them happy. That's what they've done their whole life.
Well, because it's also a crisis of comfort too. I think a lot of women get so comfortable that this idea of being because that's uncomfortable to say, I'm going to Sedona. Yeah. But for me, what I found in my weight loss transformation was that before I started, I kept looking for women over 60 who were doing amazing things on Instagram when I started. And this was before the pandemic. Yeah. And I could barely. Now it's different. In that short span of time, there's a lot more people like you and Joan McDonald and Dolphinine.
What started your weight loss journey? What was it that? Because here you are. You're into health. You're into the medical field.
I bought into being invisible. I bought into the menopause myth. I bought into, I guess this is just all there is. You know, I would feel sorry. I got comfortable. I would come home and I would say I would do intermittent fasting and then eat within that window. But I was drinking wine and I didn't have an alcohol problem, but it wasn't serving me at all. And I gained weight. It was just easy, right? I was still in the gym, but I was just fat. There was no other way around it. And I didn't like myself and I felt invisible. I would play improv with younger people and I'd get endowed with, here's grandma. And I just thought, that's all there is? I have so much to say. I've lived through so much. I'm so funny. I'm amazing. Nobody sees me. And then I realized no one was going to see me unless I took my folding chair and stuck it at a table or made the damn table myself for me to sit at. And that's when I started. I started to look for women over 60 that were doing amazing things. And I found Joan McDonald, Train with Joan. Yeah. And here was this woman who looked like me, who had defied all these, in menopause, you won't gain any muscle. Yeah. You won't be able to lose the weight. You'll always be fat. And she had done it naturally. And then I thought, if she can do it, I can do it. And then I joined their Wonder Woman program. I didn't get in on the first 2 tries. I got rejected the first 2 tries. Oh no, it took a while. But I was like, you told me no, I'll be back. And then by then the pandemic had started. And I realized the next year my son was going to graduate from medical school. And here was finally the end of an era for me, right? And I thought, when he crosses that damn stage, I want him to be as proud of me as I am of him. Yeah. And then he went to Haiti right before the pandemic started. Oh. And he got stuck in Haiti.
Was he going to work there, some residence?
He was doing a medical mission trip and he got stuck and I almost lost him. And a light bulb went off and said, that's it. I'm taking life by the balls and I'm doing it. And I never looked back. And then once I did one thing,
Did you get a trainer or what set you in the...
I didn't. I did all the training myself because it was the pandemic.
Oh, that's right.
So, I was part of the Wonder Woman program. So I started doing macronutrition, which really helped. And as you know, you've bodybuilded. 90% of it is diet, right?
Yes.
Yes, it's very tough. So once I lost the weight, they scheduled a photo shoot. They were like, you have to do a photo shoot. And I thought, I had never done a photo shoot before. Yeah. And I thought, why do I have to do this photo shoot? And they said, because then you become the woman that did the photo shoot. And it was so true. Once I did the photo shoot, I went, okay, what else is possible? And then next was the bodybuilding. What else is? After bodybuilding, I said, I've always wanted to do motivational speaking. Then I did that. Then last year I was like, I've always wanted to do a one-woman show.
Oh my gosh.
And I wrote it, produced it, did it. And now I'm having a hip replacement. So I don't know if you know, the title of my one-woman show is What If Wonder Woman Were? And I've done it now several times. So I started at 65, 66, 67, because I said, one, I have a really cool history with Wonder Woman. And then I joined the Wonder Women. And I worked for the creator of Wonder Woman for 25 years, the son of the creator of Wonder Woman. I know. Yeah, super cool. So, but I said, we never see them age.
No.
And so now the title will be, What If Wonder Woman were 67 and needed a hip replacement?
Which you know she would. Talk to
Yes, because she put a lot of stress on those damn femurs. So
I think Jane's had every shoulder, knees, hip. I think she's had all kinds of replacement. And here she was, the aerobic queen that
she has.
were watching. I mean, nobody was in better shape than she was, but that's just the reality. And I love that you shared that on Instagram, because my left hip bugs me when I do Bulgarian splits. Oh, my right side, woo, let's do 20. And then I get on my left and it's like, it really hurts. And I'm just like, oh, crap, it's going to happen. I just know it's going to happen. But I mean, and this is the thing. And tell me what you feel about this. I get such a kick now because I follow all these bodybuilders and all these people on Instagram and stuff. And you've got all these 50-year-olds and they're like, look how old I am. I am freaking 50 and look what I'm doing. And I'm like, oh, honey. I wish I could go back to 50. I wish I would have started strength training when I was 50, and because I just think that's so funny. But you're absolutely right. There is, as far as we've come in 2024, the age women who are older are just patted on the head. Oh, isn't that cute? They even start saying, they start calling you. You go through Starbucks and they're like, hi, honey. Oh, sweetheart. I'm like, stop it, or I'm going to punch you in the throat. Do not talk to me. And I get these things like, I'm with an agency in Arizona and in Salt Lake, and I'll get a casting call and they'll say, and I'll read the description, 80-year-old nun.
Oh.
And I'm like, do I look like an 80-year-old nun?
Why aren't you playing a 60-year-old astronaut? See, that's what I say is that's the problem. Yeah. Renee, it has to be women like us that lead this revolution, right? Right? And it's a revolution.
Yeah.
And, before Kamala was like running for president, I said, that was the creator of Wonder Woman, who created Wonder Woman in 1942, said in 100 years, women would take over. Yeah. He predicted it. He always believed, and that's why he created a female superhero. When he was asked to create this comic character, he created a woman because he believed that women had superpowers and they were superior. And he predicted. So long before, I was saying, there's a time coming. There's a reason I'm doing this. And I believe in that Gloria Steinem comment that an army of silver-haired women will take over. Yeah. And I, with all my heart, believe that we're here and we have to get excited and we have to say, don't settle. Yeah. There's nothing about this age that has to limit you except for your mind. Yeah. Don't get comfortable. No. Don't get comfortable. This is not the age to get comfortable. We need to see more grandmas being in the Olympics, whatever. But not, and there's nothing wrong with being grandmas. I love my grandkids.
Exactly.
But
it's our job now to, make it uncomfortable for them because grandma's in a bikini. And that's what is your mother still alive?
My mother is still alive. She's still a tough cookie.
Okay.
I still do I say the forgiveness prayer, like daily.
How did she react to your bodybuilding? Was there any kind of like, what on earth? I mean, here she's this, different.
She's always been super critical, so she would always be the first one. Cuban people, in a way, are the first person to tell you you're fat and then you're too skinny. So you can never win. If you're fat, she's like, what size pants are you wearing today? You're like, what? This is not unconditional love. So Like she's never really been to any of my shows.
Oh.
You know, one of the first shows I did in New York, I was in the taxi and she called, and then I go through this thing with her, and she goes, I go, what are you doing? Not that comedy shit again. You're not funny. That's how she talks.
Yeah.
So I'm in a way, I really got Cuban tenacity from her. She had a really tough life, and I really do have to do a lot of forgiveness because she loves my ex-husband still to this day. She hangs out with them.
Yeah.
So it's really hard, you know, when you've got an older parent and you still don't necessarily, they still don't see you.
Yeah.
And she doesn't see me.
No. And that my mother, you know, when I posted some pictures, and she, you know, she and I don't speak either. And she said to my brother, who does she think she is? What is she?
That's so hard.
Being in a bikini on stage at her age, who does she think she is? And I'm just like, you know, I don't know who I am, Mom. I'm just being me. And I'm just, you know, what's my next fun thing to do? I love projects, you know. And
I'm glad that you shared that, because I don't think enough people talk about that. And that's really sort of tough. You know, I've forgiven her. I would never be unkind, but it's like, why aren't you my biggest cheerleader?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's really sad. I really think we're really stuck in that generation where, you know, you're embarrassing your kids and your parents. And it's like, well, I can't win for losing here, you know. But I have great kids as well, and they're supportive, and you know, there's nothing better than grandkids. It's really the only reason why you should have children is because then you get grandchildren, and it's amazing. I'm grateful for that. But you are so inspiring, and I love.
So are you. I have a million questions for you, but obviously we've run out of time. So I need to have a podcast so that I can have you on.
Oh man, no kidding. I mean, and the podcast that you've been on, other strong women. I love I have to get, I can't remember her name now, the one podcast you were on, but I remember when I watched it, I thought, oh, I used to see her on Instagram, but I don't see her anymore on Instagram. I didn't realize she had a podcast. And I remember she is absolutely gorgeous, another bodybuilder. And, but she used to get so many negative comments because her hair is really short. And so with her short hair and her fabulous body, she would just get these really misogynistic comments all the time. And she's gorgeous, you know, and I wondered if maybe that was why she quit and just went to podcasting or something. I'm gonna have to ask her. But it's amazing. It's amazing when you get out there and you put yourself out there. Like you say, you have to put up with the crap that the flack that's going to be thrown your way, and people telling you that, you know, you're immodest, and you know, your poor husband, and you know, who do you think you are, and all of this stuff. And I think women in our demographic, I think we get that more.
I think we get it in general. I think it's kind of universal. I get kind of burnt out on Instagram sometimes, you know, because I kind of wonder, I get sucked down a rabbit hole. And with this hip thing, it kind of has set me back just a little bit, because I just felt like, oh, am I an imposter now because I did the body, you know, but I try not to. I just try to stay super positive and stay in the game. And I have lovely women that, for the most part, I haven't bought any followers. They're all genuine, organic women. I had someone write me today and sent me her bikini pictures quietly and said, you inspired me to do this. Shout out to you, Lynn, if you listen to this. And send me her bikini pictures. And that one thing I just say, and it's people like you. I think I wrote it to you when we first started that I wanted to be on your podcast because you had inspired me. And I think that's the positive note that we leave this on. That there's so many women doing these amazing things. If we could just hear their stories, it might get one 70-year-old on a golf cart to just pack her suitcase and go to Sedona this weekend.
Exactly.
You know?
I love it. It's a beautiful way to end the show. Well, Susan, I just love you. And one of the things that I really hate when people badmouth social media, because I have met so many fabulous people. I would have never met you You're in
I
Florida.
would have never met you.
I'm at the other part of the world. And yet I feel like we could show up tomorrow at a Starbucks somewhere and we would just pick up where we left
Yeah,
off.
I always say we could have a sleepover and we'd never come up for air. I mean, that would just, and how wonderful. It ends with, my vision was, let's not pit women against each other.
Yes. Oh,
Women are the most powerful, and I have goosebumps when women support
yes.
women.
Yes. It's
a revolution.
I want to go with you to Tulum. Next time you decide to go to Tulum, I want to go with you. My husband and I just took a trip to Mexico. We were in the Yucatan. And
nice.
On the bus, and we're driving through, and I see this sign that says Tulum, and I'm like, turn right. I want to go so badly. Then I got food poisoning, and I was like, I don't think I want to go.
Oh, yeah. Last time I did too. It was.
Really? Yeah, I don't know if I want to go back to Mexico, but I would
No
go
bueno.
with Joan, and I would go with a bunch of old ladies. That would be fabulous. Yeah.
Well, you are fabulous, and I'm not putting old because there is nothing old about you, my love. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
What an honor.
Yes, and we will meet. There will come a time. I'm meeting a bunch of Silver Sisters in Colorado, the 1st of September. They're a gathering of a bunch of women that have let their hair go gray, and again said to the world, "F you. I don't care if you think I look old with gray hair. I'm not doing this anymore." And so I'm going to have that in September, and then at some point we're going to meet up. So this is going to be fabulous.
I'll pinky swear. Have a great day.
Right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, I tried to warn you. I tried to tell you that she was fabulous. You've got to get on her Instagram. Let me put it back up again. It's at Kiki Mouse Gets Fit on Instagram. And she's got a busy life. And I love what she said, because I don't know how people do all the social media. There's constantly changing new rules. Oh, you've got to put on a reel. Oh, you've got to do this 3 times a day. Then you've got to do this. And I don't have time for that. So I just do it because I've met so many fabulous women like Susan on Instagram. And so I encourage you to just decide today. Now it's the last day of July. Tomorrow is August 1st, and I'm going to be broadcasting this on August 1st. So today's the day, girlfriend. I want you to write down, what are some things you've always wanted to do in your life? Did you want to take a yoga class? Do you want to go back to school and get your bachelor's degree or your associate's degree? Do you want to take a cooking class? What do you want to do? Just what do you want to do? And then tell your family, I have decided this is what I'm going to do. And when they start giving you all the reasons why you can't, because I need you to babysit on Thursday, Mom, but honey, I've got this trip planned. I thought you were going to go with me. Or, but what about this? And what about that? Your answer is, I love that for you, but for me, I'm going to be taking this class. It's every Tuesday and Thursday night at the community college. That's where you'll find me. And then feel really good about doing that. It's not too late to be visible, as Susan has shown you. Now, not all of us have the energy that she has, because she is out of this world. And but you just need to take back your life. Take back your life. It doesn't mean that you're not a caring person. It doesn't mean that you're not serving your family or your community, because you can do that as well. But you can also serve yourself. And that's my encouragement for you today. So thanks for joining me. And I will not be seeing you next week, because the 1st of August, I'm going to Sturgis. I'm getting on my Harley and I'm going to Sturgis. And that's where I'm going to be the next week or so. So I will not have a show for the next couple of weeks, but then I'll be back. So thanks for joining me today on She Became Visible. Bye-bye.